I've just been mentioning over the last 15 minutes or so that the Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey has been due to start a media conference in Sydney. He's on Parramatta Road at a car dealership. This is in response to the government's announcement of addressing the funding shortfall from bringing the emissions trading scheme forward by a year. So he's with car industry reps here.
My name is Craig Laundy. I'm the federal Liberal candidate that will run at the federal election in this seat for the Liberal Party. I'd like to welcome you here. Thank you to Craig Sutton for hosting us from Sutton's Holden, John Altamondi from Alto Ford for being with us, Greg Hatton from the Motor Traders Association, and Nick Karagianis from Lark Hoskins Honda up the road. These are businesses that have made contact with me in the last 24 hours to express concerns about what has unfolded. I'd like to lastly introduce you to Joe Hockey, and I thank him very much for taking a phone call late last night and agreeing to be here with me this morning to have a chat to them. Thank you.
Well, it's quite clear just from discussions here at Sutton's Holden, but also with Ford Altamonte, and a number of these dealers are involved in distribution of up to 22 different brands. This is another case of policy on the run from Kevin Rudd, but he doesn't understand this is going to be like a baseball bat to the motor vehicle industry in Australia. This is poorly thought through. There was no consultation with any stakeholders. It is exactly the same as what has happened in the past under Kevin Rudd. It's policy on the run with a huge negative impact on Australian manufacturing and Australian car making. Just speaking with dealers this morning and speaking with a number of people involved in salary packaging, hundreds of thousands of Australians earning less than $100,000 a year are going to be hit with massive increases in fringe benefits taxes. And 75% of the people that the government announced yesterday who will be affected, and the government said it will be 320,000 people, 75% of those people earn less than $100,000 a year. And they're buying Fords and Holdens and Toyotas manufactured here in Australia. And now they're going to be hit with a tax bill, on average, of $1,400 a year, every year going forward. This is classic Labor policy on the run. And for what? Well, the fact is that the carbon tax is going to keep going up and up, and they can change the name, but it's still a carbon tax. And Kate Ellis, one of Kevin Rudd's own ministers, this morning laid the dead cat on the table when she confirmed that absolutely electricity prices and the emissions trading scheme are going to see the cost of living go up for families every year. All Kevin Rudd's doing is promising 1 year of respite, pretending to get through to the election with a fake policy. Now, it is becoming, by the hour, clearer and clearer what the impact of this is on the motor vehicle industry, but even more significantly, what the impact is on hard-working everyday Australians earning $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year that have motor vehicles as a part of their salary package. And I'm going to ask Craig Sutton to say a few words, followed by the others who might want to say a few words about what they deem to be the impact on their businesses and on the motor vehicle industry. Craig?
Thanks, Joe. Our concern is this completely came out of the blue to us. The vast majority of our Holden business is done via this car allowance novated leasing business, and it's not people at the top end of the spectrum. It's nurses, Defence Force people, a lot of public service people, and overnight they've created uncertainty we don't need in the industry, which will delay people's purchasing decisions.
And Jono, would you?
Yeah, sure. I just want to reiterate what Craig had to say, and our businesses are driven on volume, and if we have this glitch in our volume, our profits and our margins are going to get cut significantly. I think it's the point that it's just been done on the run and no consultation as it's supposed to be this new government, and the effect, the long-term effect, I guess, on the Australian-built cars is going to impact quite considerably, and as companies that own multi-franchises, we're worried about the future. And until the election and we see what happens, our businesses are on halt and all stopped. So not a very good decision.
Great. Employment?
Yeah. Look, the
Greg
we've
from
all,
the Motor Traders Association.
we've all heard about the impact on the struggling vehicle manufacturers. The retail motor industry employs 320,000 Australians, and the impact on motor dealers in the sale of these vehicles, it will impact and reduce those sales without doubt. Dealers have got vehicles on order, and they are going to be standing, those will be sitting in holding yards, unable to be moved. Motor dealers are the largest employers across the retail motor industry, and indeed in many regional areas they are the major employer, and this will impact on those local communities quite substantially. We're a little bit stunned by the lack of consultation and the suddenness upon which this issue has come upon the industry, and we would certainly suggest, I think, in the longer term, or sorry, the short term here, that this government step back and rethink its approach and consider consulting with the industry.
Now, the government had a review into taxation, the Henry Tax Review, that recommended change to the fringe benefits system, which were implemented by the government in 2011. Now, that review was after consultation. You also had a Senate Economics Committee consider it, and the process has been put in place that now, or until yesterday, applied to novated leases and salary packaging. The government, without any warning or any consultation, dumped the existing arrangements and said, as from yesterday, everything changes. So if you have a novated lease and you do not keep logbooks, now you will need to keep logbooks for 12 weeks detailing every trip. And if you don't get the logbook right, there will be penalties. But what's more is if an employee doesn't get the logbook right, then employers are going to pay very heavy penalties. This is a very, very cumbersome way of trying to run a taxation system. It means more red tape. It means unquestionably higher taxes for the teachers, the nurses, the Defence Force personnel, and also private sector employees that have salary packaged motor vehicles. It also means a devastating immediate impact on the Australian motor vehicle industry, because the biggest sales for Australian manufactured cars are unquestionably part of the leasing arrangements and salary packaging arrangements. Now, Craig was saying a little bit earlier that there's a 5-month lead time in relation to cars, but we are now hearing published reports from companies putting on hold any further leasing deals. We're also hearing directly from financing companies that purchases are put on hold until these matters are resolved. This is what happens when you have government on the run, not just policy on the run. And Australians are paying a very heavy price for it immediately. The motor vehicle industry is already under stress. This decision by Kevin Rudd puts it further under stress immediately. And the only way to deal with it is for the government to identify how they got their numbers, where the details have come from, who they consulted, where the rorting is, and ultimately they've got to come up with a better plan. This is just all wrong. Finally, I warn you, when Kevin Rudd sees this backlash, he's going to come out and say, we will have a look at fine-tuning it. That's part of the fake Kevin Rudd response, because Kevin Rudd is a fake. Everyone is going to pay a price for this sort of cumbersome, poor policy. It's going to be just like Kevin Rudd's mining tax, Kevin Rudd's CPRS, Kevin Rudd's Alco Pops tax. It's going to be like everything else Kevin Rudd does. It's just fake, but with horrendous consequences for people involved in business and consumers. Questions?
Will the coalition vote against this tax plan if Labor wins the election?
Well, firstly, we never concede that Labor is going to win the election. We are in it to fight. This is not something we find attractive at all. We are going to continue consulting with the motor vehicle industry. I have deep, deep reservations, but certainly we would not start it from yesterday. I can tell you this is not the way to run tax policy in Australia. You cannot hit someone with a baseball bat when you stand behind them and expect that you're going to improve the economy or that you're going to have a positive reaction. This is a terrible way to have tax policy. It's not the way the coalition would do it.
Can the coalition rule out making changes similar to this if you win the election?
Well, we want to speak with the industry, and we're going to continue to speak with the industry. This is the first of what I assume will be a number of meetings. We want to see what the reaction is from the industry as well. Already, it was announced yesterday, we haven't seen any of the details that would allow us to have a forensic look at exactly how this was all motivated. I mean, this has come out of the blue to everyone. And I'm not going to make policy on the run, but I say to you, I have deep reservations about this. We have deep reservations because of the way it was implemented, because of the amount of money that's being raised out of everyday Australians, and we'll have more to say about our response when we go through appropriate internal processes, but also importantly after we consult with the affected parties. If there is rorting, that's fine. Let's go after that. But when it is hitting teachers and nurses and policemen and defence personnel and everyday Australians with a tax bill of $1,400 a year every year, it seems like something is desperately wrong, given that the government said they'd fixed it all.
On a broader economic note, the Prime Minister has chosen to try and recast the economic story, put it in a fairly grim light. He's talking about the end of the mining boom. Is that something you also subscribe to?
Well, we have previously said that all booms end in a bust, but Kevin Rudd only 2 weeks ago was saying the Australian economy is doing just fine. Kevin Rudd, of course, when he introduced the mining tax, said the mining boom would last for decades. Well, it's all ending in tears, like everything else that Mr Rudd does and says. It all ends in tears.
If you become Treasurer, do you expect the first term as Treasurer to be marked by fairly poor economic growth?
No. I want to see economic growth continue to rise, not continue to fall as it is at the moment. And from my perspective, it's business that creates jobs. It's business that innovates, and it's employees, when they have confidence about job security, that go out and spend the money and buy motor vehicles. But in this environment, why would they? Why would they? When you have another day, another out of left field policy that is going to hurt everyday Australians.
You're telling Labor they have to respect your mandate to repeal the carbon tax if you won government. Will you make the same commitment? The same logic applies. If they win government, you'd have to respect their mandate to turn the carbon tax into an emissions trading scheme with their savings.
Well, I don't accept that.
Why not?
I don't accept the premise of the question. We have been campaigning now for every day since the carbon tax and Julia Gillard's emissions trading scheme has been introduced. Now Kevin Rudd is hitching the destiny of the Australian economy to that of Europe. I can't believe he's doing that, but he thinks it's terrific for the Australian economy to be closer to Europe, and then he pretends to want to be closer to Asia. Well, from our perspective, linking the emissions trading scheme to Europe is an economic catastrophe in the waiting. If the Australian dollar goes down 30% compared to the euro, then the carbon tax will be equivalent of $40 a tonne here in Australia, which means higher electricity prices. And Kate Ellis, one of Kevin Rudd's own ministers, admitted that today in Adelaide, that absolutely the price of electricity is going to go up, the price of energy and gas is going to go up, and the cost to families are going to go up. And when it comes to integrity, and when you seek a mandate, you've got to tell the truth before the election. Now, yesterday, Kevin Rudd said on numerous occasions that families would be $380 per year better off. Even when his own Treasurer corrected him in the middle of the press conference and said that $380 per year is just 1 year, Kevin Rudd kept repeating $380 per year. So you can't believe anything Mr Rudd says. This is what's going on. They're making it up as they go along, and nothing illustrates that better than what's happening right here in the middle of Western Sydney, right here in a car showroom where you're seeing the real impact of a decision made on the run yesterday by Kevin Rudd.
Mr Hockey, do you congratulate the government for cracking down on what was widely seen as a tax rort?
No one saw it as a tax rort because it was meant to have been fixed in 2011. Ken Henry identified it in the Henry Tax Review. They put in place the statutory 20% to resolve that matter. They said they'll review it again, I think, in 2015. There's been no suggestion, none at all, that this has been rorted in the last 12 months. None. What happened was Kevin Rudd has run out of money, and now he's come up with a bright new idea that is going to hit the Australian motor vehicle industry, but more particularly hit everyday Australians that have an income of less than $100,000 a year, who are part of have a motor vehicle as part of their salary package. So no one, you tell me where's the suggestion that this has been widely rorted?
So people can still claim genuine deductions, so what is the problem there?
Well, because they've changed the rules on leases. They've changed the rules on leases, but also it's the paperwork, just to repeat what I said, massive amount of new paperwork, which is why they introduced the 20% in the first place, to avoid the paperwork. Secondly, if the paperwork's wrong, it is a massive new cost burden for employers. And number three, this has come entirely out of left field. There are no details that allow people to get on with a job of manufacturing and selling cars, and people paying the money to buy them. Okay.
Have you asked the Reserve Bank to stand aside in the election campaign? Have you asked the Reserve Bank to stand aside in the election campaign, given that financial markets have a pretty strong pricing for a rate cut?
Look, I'm not going to speculate on rate cuts, nor the job of the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank can never stand aside. It has a legal obligation to do what it does.
On public sector cuts, you've said that you're going to achieve that through natural attrition. Is that a promise that there'll be no forced redundancies under the Abbott government?
We have said there will be 12,000 public servants that through natural attrition will go over the first 2 years. Kevin Rudd, of course, has been talking about slashing to the bone. Yesterday he announced 800 jobs ago, and that was another off-the-cuff, spontaneous decision from the Rudd government. I mean, that's not the way to do it. We've been out there about reducing the size of the public service through natural attrition for 3 years. I mean, this is not a rude shock to anyone, because Kevin Rudd, who originally said he was going to take a meat axe to the public service, then when he was in government he increased it by 20,000 above what it was when the coalition was last in government. And then they've had all these so-called efficiency drives, and yesterday they announced another 800 jobs ago. So
that's a promise, no forced redundancy.
We have said we will reduce the public service by 12,000 through natural attrition over 2 years.
Just on the election date as well, is there still uncertainty here? I mean, the latest speculation is it's going to be in August.
Stop speculating, guys. Just look at what they're doing. Look at the damage that Labor is doing. Forget speculation about election dates. Focus on what they're announcing now. Okay? Hold your attention span for 24 hours and look at the impact of their decisions on everyday Australians as a government, right? And this is as a government because it starts from yesterday. They are taking a baseball bat to the motor vehicle industry in Australia. Now is the time to look at it, because if Labor is re-elected, this is what's going to happen. And immediately, with their incompetent decision-making, the Labor Party is having a negative impact on the Australian economy. And I just say to the Australian people, quite deliberately, forget the celebrity Kevin Rudd. We don't need Kevin Kardashian as Prime Minister. What we need is someone that knows how to govern in the best interests of the nation. And yet again, as of yesterday and today, we've seen decisions from this government that are taking a baseball bat to the everyday Australians that are trying to work hard and earn a decent living. Thank you. That's done.
Okay, that was Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey. That was live from Sydney, talking about the impact of the government's savings measures announced yesterday, including tightening eligibility for fringe benefits tax concessions on company cars.